There are stories that don't make it into history books. Tales whispered only in rural towns, where the locals warn outsiders not to ask too many questions. One of these stories begins not in the distant past, but in 1932, in a small farming community along the Ohio River. It was here that two cousins, raised under the same roof, were told they were destined to be together. And what followed was a family line so strange, so disturbing, that for decades their children lived behind locked doors, hiding a secret no one was meant to see. Their names were Thomas and Eliza. From childhood, the two were inseparable. Neighbors would later recall that they acted less like cousins and more like reflections of one another, finishing each other's sentences, walking in perfect step, staring at people with the same unsettling gaze. By the time they were teenagers, the family had already decided their marriage was inevitable. And so, in the spring of 1932, a quiet ceremony was held in the family barn. There were no wedding bands, only a binding promise whispered by their grandmother, a woman who believed the bloodline carried a gift. A gift that outsiders would never understand. Within a year, Eliza gave birth to their first child. Then another. And then another. From the outside, they appeared to be a normal, hard-working farm family. But those who lived nearby noticed small, unsettling details. The children rarely left the house. When they did, they walked in perfect unison, like soldiers following an invisible rhythm. And they never spoke, not in school, not in church, not even when spoken to directly. The teachers were baffled. The children could read and write flawlessly, yet their voices were absent. Some believed they were mute. Others whispered that they weren't allowed to speak. But the truth was far stranger. Family journals discovered decades later revealed that Thomas and Eliza believed their children shared a single voice, not one that came from their mouths, but from somewhere else entirely. They called it the inner choir. The children were said to communicate through thoughts alone, their minds woven together like a single thread stretching across multiple bodies. By the 1950s, the family had withdrawn completely from the town. Curtains were nailed shut. The children, now teenagers, worked the farm only at night. Locals claimed they could see lanterns glowing in the fields at midnight, moving in strange circular patterns, as if the family was following rituals under the cover of darkness. Then came the event that no one could ignore. On a winter morning in 1956, a fire broke out in the family home. The blaze consumed the upper floors, but firefighters who rushed inside swore the flames behaved unnaturally. They claimed the fire moved in spirals, climbing the walls like handwriting no one could read. When the smoke cleared, the entire second story had been destroyed, but every member of the family was found safe in the cellar below, untouched by the flames. That cellar would become the focus of every rumor in town. Officials who inspected it refused to speak about what they saw. But a single note survives, scribbled in the margin of a county record: rooms that should not connect. Doors that open to themselves. A humming sound without a source. The fire forced the family to relocate to an isolated farmhouse deep in the woods, and from that point forward, sightings became rare. For most people, the story might have ended there. But in 1981, a young social worker investigating neglected rural families stumbled across the last surviving members of the bloodline. What she found was something that even now remains sealed in state archives. She reported that the children, now grown, refused to be separated. When questioned individually, each gave identical answers, word for word, down to the pauses between sentences. More disturbing still, their medical examinations revealed patterns no one could explain. Heartbeats that synchronized perfectly. Brainwave activity that pulsed in unison. And something else: when one child blinked, all of them blinked. The social worker filed her report, only to resign weeks later. She told a colleague that she had felt something impossible in their presence, as if the family's thoughts had brushed against her own. The official record ends abruptly. No follow-up investigation was ever made public. The farmhouse was abandoned a year later, and the family disappeared without a trace. But here's what keeps this story alive. In 2017, hikers exploring the woods near the old farmstead discovered journals hidden in a rotting trunk. Inside were pages written in dozens of different hands, yet every entry described the same dream, a vision of a house with endless corridors, where voices whispered in unison, calling them back. Genetic tests on the papers suggested something baffling. The handwriting samples all belonged to individuals who were genetically nearly identical, yet not quite clones. The discovery raised chilling questions. Had Thomas and Eliza created more than a family? Had they created something like a single organism stretched across multiple bodies? Or was their children's secret something older, something the family had been protecting for generations? No one knows where the descendants are today. Some say they still live deep in the Appalachian woods, in houses with boarded windows, speaking not with voices but with thoughts. Others insist the bloodline ended long ago. But if you ever pass through that part of Ohio, locals might warn you to listen carefully when walking alone at night. Not for footsteps, but for the faint sound of many voices whispering the same words at once, a choir of thoughts that doesn't need a mouth to be heard. Because some families hide their secrets behind walls, and others carry them in silence, bound together by something the outside world was never meant to understand.